Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. My name is Tobias and I am a construction engineer from Sweden. Uh, I have roughly 1 year of experience working in the field, so I'm kind of fresh out of college. And one thing I've noticed quite quickly was that I found that Tekla didn't have any Western YouTube videos that could teach you the simple basic stuff about how to model and problem solving the various problems that may occur while you are modeling as a fresh engineer. Uh, a lot of the tooltips that are available are primarily for the more advanced issues that you may occur. Um, and of course, there are some good piece of content out there. And Trimble, the creators of Tekla, also have very good guides, but I would say most of them are behind a paywall. So this is me giving back to the community a bit, and I hope that we will have more experienced engineers than myself, because I am kind of fresh out of college, commenting these videos and perhaps teaching me some tips that I may then share further with all of you guys who may also be new engineers. So I am used to using both Tekla and Revit, as well as some analysis programs such as Autodesk Robot. And on this channel I will be going over all of them. But my first video will be about Tekla. So what is Tekla? Well, Tekla is a modeling program that is very, very good at steel modeling. Um, it's, in my opinion, probably the best one in the business when it comes to steel. So you can create manufacturing drawings and workshop drawings and single part drawings and a bunch of other really useful stuff really easily. And in this video, I will be showing you the UI, uh, perhaps some tips and tricks when modeling, um, and maybe also how to import an IFC file. I will get more into what that is later. But just the really basics, just to get you started in your Tekla modeling. So when you press Tekla Structures for the first time, this is the screen that you will have, right? You will see your environment, your role, and your license. So for me, it's the Swedish environment. For you, it might be something else, depending on what country you're in. And that simply means that when you open it up, it will be according to your country's standards, right? And as I said, Tekla is very good at steel, which is this one right here that I have chosen, steel. Uh, but there are other, roles as well, like general construction and stuff like that. But let's go with steel. So you press OK. So now it's going to load for a little bit, and then we will have the startup screen. And here you will press New, and let's create a new model. Let's name this YouTube 01. YouTube 1. There we go. And then let's create. It takes a while, but alright. So now that we have loaded up Tekla Structures, this is what you'll see. So let's take the named views, 3D, over to the visible views. And as you can see, a view opened up here. Now, before we start with all the fancy stuff, let's just teach you how to navigate in this space. So you see here the little purple thing in the middle? That's where you will rotate around. So if I press on my control button and my middle mouse wheel, then I can rotate around and I can look at this 3D dimensional space, right? And if I want to change that, I don't always want to rotate around the middle here. Maybe I have a column standing over here in the corner and I want to rotate around my column. Then I want to change this point to get over here instead. And I can do that by pressing the short command, which is V, just a simple V. And you can see now that I can place this somewhere. So let's place it here in the corner. and that means that I've changed my rotation around this point now. So, and this is important because sometimes, let's say that you have this way over here and you're working on a column here. When I try to rotate now, you see I'm going to rotate away from my point and it's going to be all weird when I try to navigate. So a general tip is to just always have your rotation point where you are working. It makes it easier to just, look around and see so everything is, correct. With that out of the way, let's let's fix our grid first. So over here to the right, you have the properties panel, right? And you have different panels here as well. You have applications and components and reference models and stuff like that. But let's do one thing at a time. So this is the properties panel. And everything you press, well, most of the things at least, are going to have some sort of properties attached to it. And you can change that in the properties panel. So in my case, I don't want my grid to look the way it is, even though this is just a standard one. Um, for me, I am free to create my own grid right now because I have nothing else to follow, but it could be that you get a drawing from an architect and they have their own grid lines set up. So a good practice is to follow those grid lines in that case. But for me, I don't have that right now, so I'm just going to say that I want 10 grid lines and then I press multiply, a little dot, right? And I want all of these 10 grid lines to have an even spacing of 6,000. Now, I could also, just to prove a point, instead of writing 6,000 like I did before, I can do it like this instead. And this is good if I want to have like a variation of grid lines that are, uh, you know, very different. But the moment I have several grid lines of the same distance, then I might as well just say the number and then the distance. So let's modify, and you will see that it's all wonky over here now, and that's the y-axis that I've changed. So there's 3 even spacings of 6,000. There's one spacing of 2740, and then there's one of 10,000. But let's change that. So I want my first point to start at 0. Press the space button, and then I want 2 even spaces of 12,500. And let's modify that again. So that's more like it. As for the labeling, let's add a few over here. And for my elevations, I want it to be 4,500. There we go. And as you can see now, everything that I've changed turns yellow. And the moment I modify it, it turns white again. So if I want to change this again, as you see, it turns yellow again. So whenever it turns yellow, it means that you've changed something. And whenever it's as it is, then it's going to be white, right? So I just wrote back what I already had and it turned white again because I haven't changed anything. So I'm kind of happy with this. Let's fit the work area and time around the model. I do that by simply pressing the right button and then fit work area to entire model. Now, when working in a 3D space like this, you're in most cases not going to be modeling in the actual 3D space. You're going to model in 2D and then you're going to scan over your model in 3D. So what you want to do is you want to create a new view. So as we saw before, this view is the 3D view. It's called 3D view. Now, I want to create new views along my grid lines. So how can I do that? Well, I'm going to go to view over here. And then there's a little button here that says new view. I'm going to press it. And as you can see, along grid lines. Now, if I press this button, I will get a little box. And here you can have your prefixes and you can change a variety of stuff here. But I'm not going to touch any of this because this is just a basic introduction video, right? So I'm just going to create them as they are, standard, which is in most cases good enough. Press OK. OK. Now, if I press Control I, I'm going to get my View tab. You may also go into View and then press View List over here to open the same tab. But the short command is Control I, and I recommend you using these kinds of stuff because it really helps speed up your modeling process when you get used to it. Now I'm going to open section 1, which is this section right here. And as you can see, this is just an elevation view of section 1. Now maybe I want to see both of them at the same time. I can go to window and tile vertically. But if I want to just see one of them, but I want to be able to swap quickly in between them, as we can see now, both of them are invisible views, but I'm only seeing one. But I can swap between them by pressing Control Tab. So Control Tab will let me switch between my open views. So if I add more views over here, Control I, and let's just add a bunch of them just to prove a point. Let's add all of them. Okay. Okay. Now, if I swap between these, I'm gonna swap between a bunch of different views. Now they all look the same because there's nothing different on them. But I am swapping, and you can see over here, view 5, view 4, view 3, view 2, 3D view. So that's not what I want. So let's remove that again. Okay, here we go. Now I can tile vertically. So I would do that by going over up here to the right, pressing on the window, tile vertically. Now that opens both of my views next to each other. So I can model in my 2D space, and then I can see what's happening on my 3D space if I want. So let's get into the modeling, shall we? So I'm gonna press the steel tab up here. I'm gonna model in steel red, and I'm gonna select column. Now as you can see here, the steel column tab is open here on the properties, and this shows me essentially what's gonna happen when I place a column, right? So in this case I have a 220 profile open, and I don't want that. Maybe I want a bigger one. I can either A, just write in my new profile here, and it's not gonna allow you to choose a profile that doesn't exist. So you see here that it becomes highlighted, and it gives you this warning sign. That's because this profile doesn't exist in the system. Now you can add this profile, even though this particular one doesn't exist, but you can add your own profile and into the library, and then you can just write out that name and it will be available, right? But as I said, simple video, let's skip all the advanced stuff. You can also, if you're perhaps not so familiar with the various profiles that are available in your country, you can press the profile tab over here and you will open up the library, and here you can see a variation of profiles to choose from. So you can press whichever one you want, and then you just press apply and OK, and you will have that profile selected instead. So for me, I want the HEA 300. I'll click apply and OK. And as we can see, I have an HEA 300. There are other fun stuff to utilize in this properties panel, but we're not going to go into that today. So let's just keep it as it is and place this column, right? Now I place this column simply by pressing my point and intersection point. There we go. So there's my two columns. Now interrupt the command and press Ctrl P to get it into a plan view. Now as you can see here, my column is dead center between my grid points, and that's fine, but I don't want that. Maybe I want it to be, I want it to be moved up here. So I do that by pressing the column, which will open this specific column's properties. And I can change the vertical position to up here. So instead of having it center from the insertion point, it's going to be up. Now I can do the same thing for this one, but in this case it's going to be down. Right. Now let's see here. So I'm going to change my orientation. So I rotate around this column. Now I want to change this, right? And as you can see here, it says varies. And as long as I don't touch this, I won't change these. So even if I change the height of these columns to, let's say, 4.5 meters and 0 below, when I modify now, they will still have their independent properties when it comes to, above or below, front, middle. But the moment I go in here and actually choose one, then it's going to override it. So we'll just leave that as it is and just say modify. And you can see how now that this is still up and this is still down, but they're both changing in their height, right? Okay, so there we go. So now we have our two columns. Let's put in some rafters. So I'm gonna go to beam, and as before, we will have a beam selected. Now, the um, depending on the settings that you went into, you will have a variation here. So you have a drop-down list, right? And you can choose from diagonal. You can, there, there's a big variety of predefined settings that comes from how you opened up the program, right? But in my case, I'm just going to say that this is a primary beam. You might have rafter in here, and then I would suggest that you use that one instead. But I find that the primary beam and IPE 330 is kind of okay for what I'm going to do today, right? So I want this at an angle, and how can I do that? Well, let's go into the section one here, and I'm going to go into the edit tab. So there are various ways of doing this, of course, but I find this one to be a quite simple one. So if you go into points, you can add points in your modeling space that you then snap to. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna take a long arc using center and arc points. Now what this allows me to do is I can write an angle or slope that I want this point to be inserted at. And in Sweden, it's quite common that the lowest possible slope is 5.7 degrees uh, for metal roofing. So I'm gonna apply that, and then I'm gonna go from this point to this point. Then interrupt the command and close. So as you can see now, it placed a helping point here. And this is in both the 2D space and the 3D space. So if I model out a helping line, and now I can snap to this point, and then I'll snap to my corner over here. Now I have a line that I can place my rafter on. So let's go back to steel. Let's go back to the beam. I have chosen my primary beam, an IPE 330, which is fine. Now I want it to begin over here, and I want it to go all the way. I'm gonna right click intersection, and I want to follow where this line intersects my middle, right? So that's intersection point. There we go. Voila. Now I'm gonna do the same thing for the other side. So right click, intersection. And what this does is that it basically tells Tekla that I want you to find the intersection point before you give me all the other stuff, right? So if I take center here, then I'm not gonna find the intersection points because it's gonna look for a center point somewhere. And in this case, that would probably be somewhere around on the beam or something. So, but let's go intersection point, and then there we go. So now I have my metal framing, right? And I think this looks pretty good. It's a very wide steel framing, but that's okay. Uh, and I should also mention that none of this is calculated or anything like that. So this is just me winging it, and you cannot create drawings from whatever I'm doing right now because they will probably not hold up. Anyways, let's close the properties panel for a moment. So now comes the strength of Tekla, right? Because now I want to create base plates and haunches, and I want to connect these pieces together so that it doesn't look like this, but instead looks like an actual building project that I can then create drawings from. So how do I do that? Well, this is the strength of Tekla. Over here to the right, you have something called the Applications and Components catalog. Now if I press that, as you can see, let's do the tile vertically. There we go. As you can see now, it opens up the Applications and Components window here. Now, here's a variety of different connections to choose from. So there's beam to beam, there's beam to column, there's there's all plenty of stuff, right? But I'm just gonna search for base plate, and I will get a variation of base plates to choose from. Now I like to use the 1042, so in my case I usually don't search base plate, I just search 1042 because I know that's the number from working in Tekla for a while. But if you don't know the number and if you just want to find something that suits your need, then you can just search for that name. So if I want a haunch, I could just search for haunch, right? Anyways, so 1042 base plate. Now by double clicking here, you're gonna find a new window pop up, and this is uh, an edit page, or so to speak, where you can edit the parameters and like bolt distances, or if you want anchor rods or whatever you might want for your base plate. Uh, so so let's do that, right? So I'm gonna say I want my base plate to be 20 high, right? Oh, and by the way, maybe I should show this as well. So if I just leave everything blank and place this out by just pressing on the column, then Tekla is gonna adapt and just place a random base plate that's, I mean, I wouldn't say okay, but it's something, right? And this will adapt to the the column that is present, right? So if I had a much smaller profile here, then this base plate would also be much smaller. But I want my own base plate, right? I've calculated this stuff, let's say. No, I haven't in this case, but let's say I have. Um, and I want this to be like maybe 400 and let's say 450. Now I can choose that and modify it. And that looks pretty decent. Maybe I wanted it a bit bigger, so I'm gonna make it a little bit bigger. Yeah, that's probably good. Now there are a lot of things that you can choose from in here, and all of these, hundreds or even thousands of different component catalogs, they have different uh, editing screens, right? So they're not all gonna look like this, but the standard ones have very they have similarities in between them, right? So it's not going to be all random, but it's not going to look exactly the same either. But you will probably get used to this quite quickly. So, okay, so let's go into the anchor rods tab. I want anchor rods in my case. Now, then you can see here there's a text here that says base plate width, and I'm gonna place anchor rods here, and I'm gonna say I want them to be 750 long. They can stick 50 above the base plate, which is fine. Um, and I'm gonna go and say I want an M16 rod, right? And once again, if you're unfamiliar with what kind of profiles there are available, you can just press the little button next to the search bar, and you will open up the same catalog as before. Only this time, you can see here that I'm gonna go into the circular sections, and I'm gonna choose whatever I want, right? And here I can just write that I want an M16. Let's do a rod just for the fun of it, right? And it's gonna change. So M16 and apply and okay. And now you see it says rod 16 instead. Now they are basically the same. There's not much of a difference between them, but anyhow. Uh, Same for the material. So I want an S355J2 base plate, let's say, and that's fine. But I could also go into and press on the tab, and then I would get a variation of materials to choose from, depending on which one are available. Now you don't have to do all of this, but I kind of like it because it looks nice. But you can manually adjust the drawings afterwards as well. But let's go into the others, and then we will go into the, where is it? There, nut and M nut, and I'm gonna say I want those to be 16 as well. We can have a plate washer, maybe 5 millimeters thick and 40-40. And to make these, okay, so this is important. So if I press here and I press modify, then you can see here that I don't get my nuts and I don't get my plate washers despite placing them out here, right? So what I'm gonna, I want the So over here, you need to actually say that yes, I want my nut, and yes, I want my plate washer, and then you can modify, and they will pop up, right? So that's that. Now maybe I want more. I want more anchor rods. I don't want four. Maybe I want six, right? So then I can say I want three in this way, and I want two on that way. Now if I modify, as you can see, I'm gonna get three evenly spaced, but I can also say that I want maybe 45 and 250, right? You know, just to say something. And it's gonna look really weird, but you can specify the distances between them if you want to. Now I'm just gonna leave that blank for now, but let's say that I want this to be maybe, let's say 50 maybe from the edge. Didn't change much. Let's say I want these one to be closer together, so I'm gonna say 70 and 70. There we go. So that looks kind of alright. So I'm quite happy with that. Let's just keep that. Now, if I go into base plate 10, let's do it like this. I can double click on this to open up the component catalog here for that. Now, let's apply that and 1042, activate the command, and then place that on my other over here. Now you can save these settings if you like and apply them after you've opened up this one. So let's do that. Let's just show you how that works. So I can say that this is my base plate 1, right? And I can save this as save as. Now let's delete this one and let's open up this one. So this is let's load the standard one and apply. So if you were to create your base plate, right? You will go in here and you will just load this one, and then you will place it out. And as you can see, it looks kind of wonky, kind of weird. So what you can do is you open up this one fresh, and then you take base plate 1, and then you load it, and then you apply, and then you can place out the new one instead. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's create some haunches, right? So search for haunch, and you can see here that we have our eaves haunches. So once again, I'm gonna, oh yeah, by the way, this is also kind of important. So you see the numbers here, the thick ones, 1 and 2. That tells you in which order that you should press the different elements when you place the component. So just to prove a point, if I were to press the rafter before the column, it's gonna be all wonky, right? Now I don't want that. So let's press it. Now let's do it in the proper order. So first the column, and then the rafter. And it already looks much better, but it's not how I want it. It's still weird, right? So let's go in here. Let's go into the parameters and the haunch length. Now let's say 2000. I want my haunch to be 2 meters long. Now, there we go. So one thing that's kind of cool about the eaves haunch command is that, let's go into here and press Control P. Now the profile that Tekla adds on your eaves haunch will be the same profile as the rafter above it. And that's kind of cool because that's usually how you do it actually. So you will notice later that the same is not true for the apex haunch. So you will have to manually adjust that. But one thing at a time. Let's go back into our eaves haunch. So over here we can change the bolts. So this is the bolts for the rafter, and let's say, well, 3 bolts is kind of fine actually. But maybe I want some stiffeners. So I'm gonna add a thickness here. Let's say that they are 10, and I'm gonna modify that. Ooh, let's rotation center around there. So as you can see, they place out in between my bolts. Now, if I were to add more bolts, let's say that I have 5 bolts, just to, a bit too many perhaps, but then you can see here that they add uh, the various rib stiffeners in between the bolt spacings. Now, I don't want that many bolts. I think that's too many for this purpose. I think 3 is enough. But maybe I want 3 down here as well. Why not? Let's have some fun with it. So I'm gonna go down here to the haunch, and I'm gonna add 3 bolts instead of 2. Then I'm gonna modify, and as you can see, now I have 3 bolts. Now I think that's a bit tight. Uh, well, maybe not. It could work, but I want it to be spaced a bit further away, right? So let's see now. If I play, I'm just gonna play around with this tool myself. So yeah, that's too short. But let's say maybe 75 and then modify. Yeah, it's a bit crowded. Let's do 90. There you go. And that seems pretty good, right? You could probably construct that quite easily. So that's essentially how this tool works, right? Now I want this and I want to apply it. It's already applied. So let's go here and place it on this one as well. Ooh, there we go. And as you can see, now I have 3 bolts below, 3 bolts above, same as the other one. So Control P. And I'm quite happy with that. So let's move on to the apex haunch. So for the apex haunch, it's quite simple. Now, if I go into my 3D space, and I've already have it in the plan view, so to speak, by pressing Control P, you can see here that the apex haunch is actually wider than my rafter. So to change that, let's go back here in our 2D space. Let's go into the part, and as you can see how there's a haunch profile. Now I want this to be the same as my beam profile. So now I know that it's an IP330, but just to prove a point, we can go in and look at the properties, and we can see here that it's an IPE330. Now I can just copy that in, or I could have gone into the catalog as before and picked the 330. But let's not do that. Let's do it like this. Now modify. And as you can see now, it changed the. Let's go back actually so we can see that. So you see now that this is yellow. The component is yellow, which tells me that there is something that the component is working, but it's not really properly made. So to get that properly done, we changed it to IPE330, and then we modified. And you can see now that Tekla is much more happy with it, so it created a green component instead. Now I want to add a few bolts. I think that this is a bit too few, so let's go into bolts, and let's say I want 5 bolts maybe. Now I want the first 2 spacings to be 90 apart. But after that, I want a larger spacing of, let's say, 120 before there's another spacing that's 90. Okay, that's okay. But I want it up a bit. So let's say that let's say 50 from the top, right? Ah, that's a bit too little. Let's go with 80 then. 80 might be good. Yeah, perfect. That's nice. So, and as I said, this is just me freeballing it a bit. You shouldn't take this too serious. This is just me showing you how the program works. But I like that quite a lot. That's better. So now we have our profile, or our what's it called? The structure, the framing. Now I don't want to redo this, 10 more times. So what I can do is I can first of all say, well, I don't want to take the grid, and I don't want to take any reference models or helping points. I just want to select this. Now I can also just go into here, which is my filter, and I could say, you know, pick up steel or something like that. Because I believe in this case I don't have anything else but steel, so that would be okay. Uh, but there's no reason for that right now. But just know that there is a filter function, and it's really good to learn and to be comfortable with using it. Um, so yeah, so you see material steel right here. Anyways, so I'm just gonna mark all of this. There we go. And as you can see, I picked up all my structure, and I'm gonna right click, and then I'm gonna take copy special, and then I'm gonna take linear. So what this essentially allows me to do is it allows me to make multiple copies with a set distance in all three directions. Now in my case, I just want to copy it 6 meters because that's what my grid lines is, right? So I'm just gonna press a point here, and then I'm gonna press another point on my grid line, which is 6,000. And as you can see, it filled out the distance that I just drew. You can also do this manually if you like. And in my case, I want to copy this frame 10 times. So I'm just gonna write 10 there, and then I'm gonna say copy. And as you can see, it copied out my frame 10 times. Now, there we go. So yeah. Now, this is obviously far from done, but I think this is a good place to stop the first video. So we went over how to place some columns, the properties panel, the components catalog, um, and you know, just some general modeling tips. So let me know in the comments if there's something you wished I've done differently, or if there's something else that you would like to know more about, and you know, let's just take it from there, one step at a time, right? So thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you all in the next video. Thanks.